We had to survive 100 days in hardcore modded Minecraft. We have 3 objectives. First, journey to the Betweenlands. This sinister dimension hosts some terrifying creatures. Second, obtain full Valonite weapons and armor, only found in the ominous caves of this dimension. And third, defeat the Dreadful Peat Mummy. Can we survive for 100 days? Stay tuned to find out. Day 1. We spawned on a sky island. We started by mining some gravel and rocks all day. When it struck night, we punched a creeper away and grabbed all the blocks. We turned the corner, looked up, and saw a strange red figure on the other island. We looked at each other in disbelief. When we turned back around, they had disappeared. Had someone snuck onto our server again? Or was this part of the mod pack? We didn't think much of it and started gathering blocks and bridged over to the other island. We picked up the 2 torches and then searched the island. Unfortunately, we found absolutely no clues. So on day 2, we started to get to work on gathering the materials for our base. We chopped up a lot of wood and started on the outer structure. We then crafted ourselves a clay kiln, lit a fire underneath it, and realized we kind of made an oversight starting a fire near a wooden base. So in the process, we nearly burnt down our base, but luckily we put out all the fires, burnt down a nearby tree, and once we had our charcoal block, we then moved the kiln outside of our base. Then we smelted up some stone and replaced the clay kiln with a stone grill. We then made some extra tools and put them inside a tool chest, and when going back to our grill, we fought a strange mob that shot out fire lasers, known as a flame golem. We also fought a karate zombie. We then sat around the grill and waited for some raw beef to cook up. Once our food was cooked, we headed back to base, and when we went inside, Painful had noticed that our tool chest was missing. We were really confused and looked around for some sort of answer. After some investigation, we came to the conclusion someone must have stole our chest. It had to have been the person we saw before. But where did he go? We couldn't find him at all on the island, so we continued with what we were doing. Throughout the rest of day 3, we worked on finishing the roof of our base, and after a couple more days, our base was complete. On the morning of day 6, we started building pens for our animals, and in this mod pack, you can actually pick up most animals, so this made the whole transportation process a lot easier. On day 9, we started gathering a lot of dirt so we could have enough blocks to bridge over to another island. After finishing our bridge, we dropped into the water. Little did we know there was a hammerhead shark that was waiting for us. I tried going in for another hit, but the hammerhead shark hit me for 5 hearts of damage, so I backed up and let Painful handle the rest. I then gathered up some sugarcane and some carrots, potatoes, and beetroots I found. Painful then got to work on building the staircase back up. We also noticed an entrance to a strange looking dungeon in the water. After seeing the monsters inside, we knew we had to run away. We could not mess with these things with no armor. So we went back up our staircase and decided we should probably go back to base now that it was night. On the morning of day 10, we created a grindstone. This was so we could grind up bones and get ourselves some bone meal. We then used the bone meal to craft farmland and created the farms on our other island. After returning back from finishing the farms, we gathered our leather and used the leather to craft ourselves sleeping mats. Now we could finally get some much needed rest. After waking up for day 11, we walked outside. We were greeted by quite a creepy looking sign. Both looked at each other. It was a little suspicious that Painful was just trolling me here. We then crafted ourselves kites so we could travel from island to island a lot easier. So we ran out the front door and started gliding. These kites are a little bit difficult to control, but still extremely useful. Future Forest here. Turns out 95% of you aren't subscribed. So if you want to be a part of the 5% club who are, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We decided to land on the island with all the dark oak trees, sheared the sheep, and mined some of the dark oak wood. We then went on top of the trees and used our kites to get back to the base. When above the void, the kites get a gust of wind, which actually helps us get back to the base a lot easier. We then used a piggy backpack to pick up sheep so we could kite back with the sheep on our backs and place them in our animal pens. For the next 3 days, we went exploring with our kites and went from island to island to collect resources. I got a bunch of food, and Painful ended up finding some strange altar. There was some sort of blue hieroglyphics in the stone, so we went to take a closer look. And at the center of it, it looked like we could craft something. Before we could piece together what this was, mobs had spawned in right next to us. They were called Dark Druids, and they dealt a ton of damage. Considering we were only in leather armor, we weren't doing ourselves any favors. One teleported right behind me, and Painful and I ganged up on him. A bear also tried joining into the battle, but after killing the Dark Druid, we both ganged up onto the bear, and we knew it wasn't gonna last much longer. We ended up killing a few more Dark Druids, and one of them ended up dropping something. When we picked it up, it said it was an unfamiliar item, so we weren't entirely sure what it was yet. The Dark Druids just kept on spawning, so we decided it was about time to leave and head back to base. When our base came into view distance, we immediately noticed something was wrong. Our base was in flames. We had to get back quick, otherwise our base was gonna burn down to the ground. We were only gone for a few days, how could this happen? And when we walked into the base, we were greeted by another sign. Whoever this was didn't seem to want to communicate in a peaceful manner. We also noticed he killed all of our animals. So for the next 4 days, we began the process of rebuilding our base. base. We decided to build this one out of stone instead, just in case of another fire. So for the next 4 days, we began the process of rebuilding our base. Decided on making it about 2 stories high, and we refilled our animal pens with new animals. We also made some teepees, which were basically much cooler beds. On day 21, we decided to do a ritual. We made ourselves a flute, a rattle, a drum, and chimes, and started a ritual called the buffalo dance. And by playing all these instruments, we could turn our cows into buffalo. We then continued mining for the next 3 days until we both had full iron armor. And on day 25, we decided to return to the altar. We figured out what the dark druids were dropping was used in this crafting ritual. So we kept killing dark druids until we had all 4 pieces to perform the ritual. Whoa, that was cool. It seemed to have crafted a key out of the 4 pieces. So we took the key and realized that this was the key into the Betweenlands. After returning to base with the key, we went on to a separate island, put down a sapling, and right-clicked it with the talisman, creating the Betweenlands portal. After exiting the Betweenlands portal, something had told us we've made a big mistake. Is this the same person that burnt down our base? All of a sudden, we were fighting off a horde of monsters, which seemingly came out of nowhere. Whoever this was did not want us going into the Betweenlands. We fought off a horde of zombies and frozen skeletons. They did a lot of damage, so we needed to make sure not to get hit. After defeating a few more zombies and frozen skeletons, we had defeated the horde. Once everything was defeated, this person promised that we wouldn't survive it next time. We'll see about that. We decided against going into the Betweenlands and decided to go to the Nether first, as we wanted to be prepared with potions and better armor when we went to the Betweenlands. Once we entered into the Nether, we realized the Nether was also made of sky islands. So we continued and used our kites for the next 7 days, trying to look for a Nether fortress. After several days of searching, instead of finding a Nether fortress, we found some sort of strange mansion on one of the islands. We weren't sure what it was, so we went to go investigate. We then landed on the roof, and Painful went down to fight some of the monsters protecting the mansion. He started taking a ton of damage and got hit by a creeper, so I dropped down to help him and started taking a ton of damage as well. We needed to play this extremely carefully. I realized that we were both surrounded, so I ate some food and started pillaring back up. We were not gonna die today. I regenerated my health, and we took a more careful approach and tried to defeat the mobs one by one. After defeating a bunch more mobs, we finally were able to enter the mansion. It almost seemed like a vacation home and had a ton of chests inside. We checked to see what was inside the chests, and there was a bunch of materials, including some diamond armor. This was going to help us drastically when we journeyed to the Betweenlands. There was even an enchantment table and brewing stands here, so we decided to pillage the entire mansion and take it all. Once we took everything, we started to kite back to base. Made it back safely and went to start working on our base again. While crafting doors, we ended up hearing a strange sound. It sounded like 2 anvils being placed nearby, but we weren't sure where it came from. So we checked outside and looked around. Painful was certain that it came from underneath our base, so he started digging up the floors. I was kind of skeptical, but he wanted to check just to make sure. He mined down and found an opening. What the heck was underneath our base? We discovered what seemed to be a secret underground base right underneath our noses. There were animals trapped in cages and 2 signs saying kill Painful and kill Forest. This had to have been the same person. It's too much of a coincidence for it not to be. So we helped free the animals, and we also noticed that the underground base went even deeper. Why were there skulls everywhere? We noticed another sign that said trap animals. Whoever this was wasn't trying to hide what they were doing. Once we reached the bottom of the cave, there were even more animals caged up. This time the sign said do not feed. What was this guy doing with these animals? Was he conducting experiments onto them? We needed to find out, but not before we freed all the animals and put them back in our animal pens. We also found his escape route that he seemed to have taken after placing the anvils. We missed him by just a hair. We created a plan to try and catch him, but we weren't sure if it would work. There was only one way to find out, so we spent the night waiting for him to come back, but he never did. Days 36 to 38, we spent mining for the rest of our diamond armor and brewed potions in preparation for the Betweenlands. It was time. I kited over, landed in the water, and Painful and I went through the portal. When we got to the other side, our potions were tainted. This must have been a side effect of entering the Betweenlands. Just to make sure, we went back to the overworld, and our potions did in fact turn back to normal. So we put them back in our chests and went back into the Betweenlands. We began working on our base, which we decided was going to be already a treehouse. After about a day of building, our treehouse was complete. It wasn't too big, but we made a bridge that connected 2 trees to make the base a little bit bigger. We also made a ladder down so we could start working on a mine shaft. I ended up finding a cave, and inside the cave there was a strange creature called the Wight, which looked pretty similar to an Enderman, except for the fact that it had a special ability. It could turn into a ghost. By turning into a ghost, it latched onto me and started hitting me repeatedly, which did a lot of damage. I had to eat a golden apple to make sure I didn't die. Luckily, I could still hit it, and when it finally got off of me, it got stuck in a wall, and I finished it off. I then continued mining and found sulfur, which is the equivalent of coal in the Betweenlands. After that small mining trip, Painful and I started exploring the Betweenlands. We ended up finding a strange-looking structure on top of a giant root. We weren't sure what it was, but when we approached it, there were signs warning us with danger. We began scaling the root and noticed there were similar skulls that we had found in the Nether and underneath our base. We carefully entered the structure and found a few chests in the back. There ended up being some pretty good loot inside these chests, including an ancient greatsword, an ancient battle axe, and some Valonite armor. The battle axe was pretty cool. We then investigated a lever on the wall, which had said there was a secret lair. We hit the lever, and the floor came out from under us. Luckily, we had fast reflexes. Those water buckets saved us. It was a trap. We probably should have seen that coming. We also heard some strange sound. It was some sort of creature playing a flute. Not really sure what that was. After looting that base, we decided it was time to go back home. So from days 46 to 49, we boated back. But on the way home, we saw somebody in the distance. They had TNT on our house. Was this the guy from before? He saw us coming. We couldn't close the distance fast enough. He lit the TNT and ran off behind the tree. And before we even had time to react, our base was blown into smithereens. We were both in awe of what just happened. After the explosion had finished, we tried looking for the culprit, but he was nowhere to be seen, completely gone. Luckily, we didn't keep too much stuff in that base, but the carnage was unreal. We started worrying about our main base. So we went back through the portal and checked up on our base in the overworld. We checked both floors, and it seemed like there was no damage done. How come he didn't touch our main base? We didn't think much of it and went back to the Betweenlands, this time exploring the caverns. We wanted to complete our second goal and find enough Valonite to get full Valonite armor for the 2 of us. Found some weird creatures down here in the caverns. What the heck even is this thing? A boulder with a mustache? We continued through the caverns and found our first vein of Valonite. We knew we were going to need a lot of this stuff, so we spent the next 7 days mining for Valonite. After a few days of travel to return home, we crafted our full Valonite armor and enchanted some books. We then went back to the Betweenlands and continued exploring. Felt like we kept finding more and more stuff in the Betweenlands. We found even more cages. This time they were labeled Testing Chamber number 8196. This person was doing experiments, but for what reason? We decided to free all the animals out of the test chambers. This is just straight up cruel at this point. We also ended up finding a massive tree, and there were faces on the branches. We started getting attacked. Was this some sort of killer tree? This tree was in fact alive and was definitely trying to kill us. So we kept attacking it, and it shot out some huge wooden spikes. Luckily, the attacks were easy to dodge, and after a while, we ended up defeating the spirit tree. Ended up dropping a sapling, which we brought back home and planted on one of our islands. It looked like a tiny version of the tree we just fought, but this spirit tree was tamed. What do you think we should name our new pet? Leave your suggestions down in the comments. On days 75 to 82, we trekked through the Betweenlands once again and stumbled upon a stronghold. When entering the stronghold, there was an eerie sound that was ringing in our ears. We entered one of the rooms and there was a spawner, spawning swamp hags. These things are pretty terrifying. We fought off the swamp hags and broke the spawner. We then found a secret treasure room underneath the stronghold, which had Valonite blocks, octime blocks, and all sorts of other stuff. So we took it all and then ventured to the second story of the stronghold. Painful is getting chased by a ton of monsters, so I started helping him out, and this battle axe is really coming in handy now. It was able to hit multiple mobs at once. I then tried breaking the spawner and heard one of my pieces of armor break. My helmet had broken. How the heck? All my other armor was fine in durability. It must have been one of the special mobs. So I crafted myself a new Valonite helmet. We then ventured to the very top, and we were met by a huge barrier. Only the sword keeper may pass this point. We tried walking in anyway, and the barrier threw us off the edge. Luckily, there was water beneath us, but we needed to figure out how to get past that barrier. We found out on one of the floors, there were these strange item cages that we could break and connected to a center point. So we broke all 4 of them, which ended up forming an item and ended up being a sword. This must have been the key into the barrier. Painful then walked into the barrier while holding the sword, and the barrier broke down. There was some sort of strange eye in the middle, and it teleported us up on top of the tower. I looked up and then saw a strange looking orb. This was the boss. It had a really strange name, Primordial Malevolence. We figured out we could shoot the green orbs back at the boss and break down the barrier. This provided us with an opening to attack the boss. It looked like a mini white that was inside the orb. We had to break down more of the barriers, so we kept shooting green balls back at the boss. Once we broke down enough barriers, this provided us a big opening to attack the boss even more. After knocking it down, we continued double teaming the boss and then defeated the Primordial Malevolence. The boss had dropped some sort of amulet and gave us a ton of levels. We then returned to base, and while breeding the animals, lightning had struck down from the sky, turning our pigs into zombie pigmen. This was definitely the work of that person. We must have angered him in some way. After defeating the pigmen and putting out the fires, we returned back to the Betweenlands. We ended up finding a strange creature called the tar beast that looked like it was bathing in sludge. Painful accidentally dropped in, and I also went in to help him. Fighting this thing maybe wasn't the best idea. The tar beast dragged us both into the tar, and we couldn't see anything. We had to pop golden apples to survive, but luckily, after a few more hits, the tar beast was defeated. We then ventured even deeper into the Betweenlands and found what looked to be a mansion. Was this his main base of operations? We slowly entered the building and immediately noticed a pile of skulls. These were the same exact ones from before. This had to be it. We also noticed some experimentation plans on the walls. We found a back room that looked to be some sort of laboratory. Is this where they were conducting their experiments? There were cauldrons, geckos inside of cages, hearts and eyes on the walls. This place is giving me the creeps. There was a way upstairs, but it was blocked off by an energy barrier. Luckily there was water again because this one also knocked us away. So we decided it was time to craft mummy bait and take on the Dreadful Peat Mummy. After throwing down the mummy bait into the sludge, the Dreadful Peat Mummy rose from the ground. It immediately lunged towards me, snatching me into his jaws. I couldn't move. I kept on attacking it, trying to escape from its clutches. It let me go, but I was stuck in the sludge, and it also summoned a mini peat mummy. Painful was also stuck in the sludge and couldn't get to me. I finally got into the river and started spamming down blocks. I needed to create some distance and let Painful start attacking it. Couldn't this thing stop targeting me and target Painful? Painful did all the damage while I was tanking the boss, and Painful had landed the final blow. I ended up getting stuck in a block, but once we had escaped, we took the loot from the boss and returned back to the mansion. Painful had noticed that the energy barrier was gone. It appeared that defeating the Dreadful Peat Mummy had gotten rid of the barrier, and once we had climbed up the stairs, we had finally found the person haunting us this entire time. After exchanging blows with the boss, I walked up and began battling him with my axe. He did a ton of damage, so I had to put up my shield, making sure to block his attacks. We had to fight this strategically, so I switched out with Painful, and Painful and the mysterious person started to clash. I gave him some support with my bow, and Painful backed up and started using his shockwave sword to knock him away. We continued bowing him, and after a few more shots, we had defeated the mysterious person. We had also gotten his head, which was quite creepy. It being day 100, we had completed our goal of surviving 100 days. If you guys would like to see 200 days, make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and take care.